Beer hats. Oh, no! Battles deep into the night! Has left the stadium entirely!
You're listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Ellis on Inside Arkansas.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast presented by Inside Arkansas and hosted by Andrew Ellis. Today's episode is brought to you by Roback Apparel. Go to roback.com and use the code HOGSBY20 for 20% off your first purchase. That is RHOBACK.com. Appreciate you guys for being here with me on today's episode of the Baumbastic Podcast. It is July 10th. It is a Thursday. We are now 3 days away from the MLB Draft, which is going to be a very big deal for players in the program, players potentially coming to the program, transfers, high school kids, former players, all of the above. It's going to be a very big weekend for Arkansas baseball. It'll start on Sunday and finish on Monday throughout the day. And so we're going to continue to provide all the coverage of the draft and what it means for Arkansas. And there's a lot of weird nuances to sift through. And so we're going to do our best to break it all down. And so appreciate you guys for, again, being here on today's episode. And hopefully I'm not confusing you guys too much, because I've talked a lot about the draft and a lot of different things throughout these offseason podcasts, and it can be a little weird. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The MLB draft is probably the most complex, and it's not like this, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand it, but if it's your first time really paying close attention to this whole process, it can be a lot. And so I feel like I've tried my best to, talk through it and make it make sense a little bit and talk through it in a way that doesn't sound super confusing, but it always will be a little bit. And the tough part about it is you just don't know. You don't know how these teams view the players. You don't know how these players view. I mean, hell, there's a lot of financial decisions that are made during this process, and I don't know what these kids' finances are like. I don't know what their parents' finances are like. I don't know. Some of these guys might be making this decision with, their parents might have tens of millions of dollars. And it's like, oh, yeah, who cares about $300,000 in the MLB draft or whatever? But that's not the case for everyone. And so I don't want to make it sound like I know exactly what's going to happen. And I'm, what I'm saying and what I'm predicting is for sure how it's going to play out. But I want to do my best to kind of break down the MLB draft upcoming this weekend and sort of assess where we're at. And we've talked about it a lot. And so a lot of this information is not going to be brand new to you, but this is pretty much the last time we're going to talk about it before selections start happening. And there's a lot at stake for the Arkansas Razorbacks and the program, both for this past year's team to kind of honor some of those great seasons. I mean, Vahiva Aloy, of course, is going to be a first-round pick. That's an awesome thing, and we're going to celebrate that as well. But there's a lot of questions that are going to be answered in terms of next year's roster and the future of Arkansas baseball. And so it's definitely going to be an important, stressful time. I do not envy these college coaches who are having to make your decisions on your roster and trying to sort stuff out and put guys in certain positions when you really, again, just don't know. You have an idea and you can have these conversations with players, but you just don't know how it's going to play out and how these teams are going to feel about them throughout the draft process. And so on today's show, it's going to be pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Our guy, Joe Doyle, who we talk about a lot, who covers the MLB draft for the Future Star Showcase, he does a great job. And we've talked about him a lot. Good, I know he sometimes listens to the show. So shout out to Joe Doyle if you're listening, which always gives me it always makes me feel good when cool people listen to the show. But he released a top, I think it was 700 players or something. Creates an absurd number. Actually, it's 615, I believe is what it is. 615 players. And that's a lot to sift through. And of course, there's a lot of Razorbacks on that list. And so we're basically just going to go through his list, how he has them ranked. And again, Joe Doyle's the man. He covers the draft as well as anyone. This is not a full proclamation of, hey, this guy's projected to go here. That's for sure where he's going to go, and he's going to sign for X amount, and it's just a done deal. But I think his rankings are a very good reference point to sort of start this conversation and assess what the stakes are and what the situation is for each of these guys. Because, again, it's not a perfect science at all. Every year there's guys who get drafted higher than they were maybe projected, and some of those guys end up signing for some of the money that makes a little bit more sense based on where they're projected. But again, I think his metrics and his tools and his ranking system is a very good barometer for sort of how he can have some of these discussions and make sense of it all. And there's a lot to learn from it, honestly. And we brought up his rankings. I believe it was maybe 2 weeks ago on the show. We brought up Joe Doyle's rankings. I think at that point it was like 500, 600 players on his thing. So there's a little bit more to it. Also, a lot of these rankings have changed a little bit. And they didn't just change because the wind blew a certain direction. Usually means there's a reason why those changes happen. And so we're going to break it all down, and we're going to talk about it on today's show. It's going to be a pretty straightforward MLB Draft primer, because I thought about different ways I could do it, of like, should I break it down into the juniors and then the sophomores and then the high school guys and all this? Really, I'm just going to tell you, hey, I'm going to go through every single one of them, some of which are going to be seniors, some of which are going to be sophomores, some of which are going to be incoming freshmen. We're going to talk about what each guy's ranking means and sort of how the situation lays out for those guys. And it doesn't mean that every single player on this list is guaranteed getting drafted. It doesn't mean that every player not on this list is guaranteed not getting drafted. But again, I do think there's a lot to learn from these rankings and sort of how people in the industry view them and sort of how some of these MLB teams view them, because I know, and as a matter of fact, Joe Doyle had a funny tweet the other day where he was like, everybody's got sources these days. How about that? Everybody does have sources these days, but Joe Doyle is one of those guys that has some sources. And so I usually take what he says, not with a, what's the opposite of a grain of salt? I take what he says with a pile of rocks. I don't know what the opposite of a grain of salt is, but I usually listen when he's talking. And so, again, we're going to break it all down. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about a couple of our sponsors, starting with Hickey and Hull Law Partners here in Arkansas, where they handle matters such as divorce, custody, criminal, civil litigation, and more. Divorce and custody cases are too important to try and face alone. Let Hickey and Hull Law provide you with the persistent and diligent representation to help guide you through the entire process. They've handled thousands of family law cases and have experienced nearly every scenario that may come up. They push the case forward for their clients, advocating for them in a diligent and consistent manner from start to finish. Hickey and Hull Law have offices across the state of Arkansas in Fayetteville, Fort Smith, Little Rock, and Mena. You can call them today at 479-434-2414, or you can check out their website, visit hickeyandhull.com, or scan the QR code in the top right corner of your screen. It's Hickey and Hull Law. Things are about to get better. Today's show is also brought to you by Looper Auction and Realty. Why wait months or even years to sell your home the traditional way? At Looper Auction and Realty, they offer a faster, smarter option. Sell your home at auction. No repairs, no contingencies, no drawn-out negotiations. You set the terms, buyers compete, and you walk away with a firm closing date. Whether it's your home, an estate, investment property, the auction method puts you in control and gets it sold fast. Call Looper Auction and Realty, 479-996-4848, or visit looperauction.com. It's Looper Auction and Realty, sold in 30, closed in 30. So again, this is not going to be some crazy nuanced. We're just going to read the rankings. I'll react to them. We'll talk about what that means and how that lines up for them. And so we're going to start at the very top. We're just going to go through. It's 615 prospects. Dude, I don't even know. Like, I have trouble sometimes, talking about this Razorback program where, there's a lot of players in the program, transfers, recruits, targets, whatever. It's like 60 to 70 players. And so I pride myself on knowing as much as I can about these 60 or 70 players that are involved with Razorback baseball any given year. And it's a lot to keep up with. And I appreciate everybody who wants to know about these guys. I cannot imagine going through 615 players and like really ranking them all and like knowing it. And I commend all these draft guys that do it, man. And this time of year, man, I mean, Joe Doyle's not alone, by the way. There's a lot of great people that do great work covering the draft. I mean, Kylie McDaniel at ESPN does a great job. Peter Flaherty at Baseball America, who we had on a couple weeks ago, he does a great job. All these guys, I bet they're just pulling their hair out. They cannot wait for this draft to be over with. But again, let's start at the top. According to Joe Doyle and a few other people, I was watching Baseball America yesterday. They were doing a mock draft, and they had the first Razorbacks selected in this year's draft, the same as Joe Doyle has as his top projected Razorback, or at least in his rankings. Number 16, right-handed pitcher Gage Wood, the pride and joy of Batesville, Arkansas. Now, this is not the most surprising development of all time. We kind of knew with the way that Gage Wood pitched down the stretch, with the buzz he had started to generate, the fastball metrics, we kind of know what the case is with Gage Wood. And I think I said it in the moment when he threw that no-hitter. And, of course, the draft is not a meritocracy. But I felt like when he threw that no-hitter, I was like, this probably solidifies him as a first-round pitcher. And I think a lot of other people felt the same way. Number 16 overall. Now, there's a lot of college pitchers in this draft that are up there near the top. Cade Anderson from LSU is probably going to be the first college arm taken. Liam Doyle is going to be not too far behind him. Kyson Witherspoon from Oklahoma, he's not going to be too far behind them. Jamie Arnold from Florida State, that's another guy. Like, all those guys I just listed might get drafted in the top 12, 15 range, and Gage Wood's right there behind them at number 16 here in this ranking. I saw him go number 12 in Baseball America's mock draft, which would be very high would be, Hagen Smith last year got drafted number 5 overall. Before that, Arkansas had not had a pitcher drafted higher than 20. Ryan Stanek was the highest one before that, I believe. And so Gage Wood very well could be, aside from Hagen Smith, the best pitching prospect we've ever seen at the University of Arkansas. And, of course, it's just kind of crazy that you have it in back-to-back years. You have the number 5 overall pick as a pitcher left-handed, and now you might have a number 16, number 17, number 12, somewhere in that range. Maybe he falls to 22 or whatever, but somewhere in that range, a right-handed pitcher. For those wondering at home, the slot value, projected slot value, now it doesn't necessarily mean he would guaranteed sign for this amount, but the projected slot value for the number 16 overall pick, $4,929,600. Some serious coin. Gage Wood could buy the city of Batesville if he really wanted to. So happy for him. And will it be that number? Will it be something else? It's going to be a good weekend for Gage Wood. Let's just say that. It's going to be a good weekend. Next up on the list, not too far behind him, is his shortstop, Vahiva Aloy, at number 20 on Joe Doyle's list. Again, I feel like he's another guy that's pretty comfortably in that first round range. I've seen some have him as high as maybe that 15, 16, 17 range. Seen some have him down in the 26, 28 range. He's going to be somewhere in that mid to late first round range. And I feel like he's done enough. Certainly the Golden Spikes Award winner, improved across the board statistically. We kind of know the tools, the power, the ability to stick at shortstop, pretty well-rounded as a prospect. We'll see how his hit tool carries. I feel like that's kind of the big question mark. Of course, we know he can hit. We know he can hit for power, but there's a lot of swing and miss there. How's that going to translate with a wood bat? Those are the questions that he's going to have to answer. But even with those questions being there, a bona fide first-round pick. Picking at number 20 is the Brewers. And I've looked at some other mock drafts. A lot of mock drafts I've seen have the Cubs taking Vahiva Aloy at number 17. They have the number 17 overall pick. There's several Hogs in the Cubs system already, so there's some familiarity there. Usually those things don't happen by accident. I would imagine the Cubs have an area scout over here in Fayetteville. There's tons of scouts at every practice, every scrimmage Arkansas has, and I imagine a lot of those, it's not a coincidence they fell in love with Christian Franklin. Not a coincidence they fell in love with Jackson Wiggins. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Vahiva Aloy has been mocked to go to the Cubs by several different outlets throughout the course of this whole process. If he were to go number 17 to the Cubs, the slot value for that pick, $4,750,000 or $750,800. Number 20 is where Joe Doyle has him. And by the way, this is Joe Doyle's ranking. This is not a mock draft, which is a difference. Ranking is you're ranking the players. Mock draft is how you think the draft is actually going to play out, and it never plays out the way that we all expect it to. But at number 20, that slot value is $4,268,100. So again, it's going to be a good weekend for Vahiva Aloy. Next up on Arkansas's list, number 36, Zach Root. And so the number 36 overall pick, that would be in the competitive balance round A. There's always like weird little stretches. For those that aren't familiar with that terminology, after the first round, there's all these weird compensation picks and competitive balance picks. And basically the competitive balance is you take the worst teams, you give them an extra pick or whatever. And there's all these weird rules, and I don't even know them all, and I'm not going to go through them. You're not going to learn them today, at least not from me. There's all these weird rules where, like, if you have a guy and he's got a year left on his contract and he ends up opting out of it, or if he ends up, you lose a guy in arbitration, there's all these weird rules for if you lose a player in free agency or something like that, you get like an extra pick back, and that's where you get some of those compensation picks. So there's like a little bitty section there between round 1 and round 2, and this is basically where Zach Root is projected to go. I always think it's funny because you'll have a guy go, like, for example, the final competitive balance round A pick is number 43. Number 43 overall in every other sport, that is not a first-round pick. But if you get drafted in that round, it'll say competitive balance round A. I'm calling myself a first-round pick if I get drafted 43rd overall. The slot value for the number 36 overall pick, which is the Minnesota Twins, $2,692,000 even. And so somewhere in that range is about what we're looking at for Zach Root. Got a real chance to be another first-round arm. Arkansas has had like 4 first-round pitchers in the history of the program or something like that. I should have looked up the number before I did this. They've never had 2 in a year. Arkansas has never had 2 first-round picks in a single season, let alone two first-round pitchers. Arkansas's definitely got a chance to have 2 first-round picks in Vahiva Aloy and Gage Wood. Got a very real chance to have 2 first-round pitchers in Wood and Zach Root, and potentially 3 pretty much first-round picks overall. Definitely a good development for your program, I would argue. Next on this list is a high school player, and we have a little bit of a drop-off here now. Not a huge drop-off, but a little bit of one, and then there's going to be an even bigger drop-off after that. The next player on Joe Doyle's list is a big riser. The last time we did this list, this guy, I can't remember the exact number, but it was in like maybe the 140, 150, 180 range. Landon Schaefer, the Fayetteville High School shortstop, who, if you have been listening to this show, I've been saying, don't really expect Landon Schaefer to come to campus. Obviously, we would love to have him. He's a tremendous ball player, very talented. You don't get picked in this kind of range. You don't get this type of buzz without being a very, very talented player. So it would certainly be a notable development if he were to fall and wind up making his way to or wind up staying in Fayetteville to play his collegiate career. That is not my expectation. Who knows? These things change. I don't want to sit here and be like, hey, don't completely cross him off the list altogether. But if this ranking from Joe Doyle is any indication of where, if he goes anywhere close to this in the MLB draft, if you see his name selected, almost certainly means he's agreed to terms and he's going to get paid a good bit. The slot value for pick number 64 by the Guardians, $1,382,300. That's a lot of money. And that is, if Landon Schaefer gets anything close to that number, he shouldn't even call DBH and ask. He should just go ahead and sign right there on the dotted line. And we will wish him well. Absolutely. I mean, this happens just about every year. Last year, Arkansas had an infielder, I believe it was Tyson Lewis was his name, that signed for honestly a similar amount of money, maybe even a little bit more. Again, if this happens with Landon Schaefer, wish him well. Congrats. And these are just things. When you're a program at the level of Arkansas, this is just what happens. Your high school recruits are also getting offered a lot of money, and you just kind of have to deal with it. The next guy on the list is number 66, right after him, Charles Davalon, which pick number 66 would be the first pick of competitive balance round B. You've heard about competitive balance round A. Well, now here's the sequel, competitive balance round B, which would be, again, right after the second round ends and before the third round begins. So it's kind of up to you. Do you want to consider it a late second round pick or an early third round pick? But pick number 66 is where Charles Davalon, or ranked number 66 on Joe Doyle's list. Again, it's not a mock draft. This is not him predicting how these picks are going to play out. But the pick number 66 slot value from the Guardians has a slot value of $1,320,400. Again, it's a lot of money. And Charles Davalon is another guy. He's a draft eligible sophomore. So, of course, he has that option. And, a lot of these guys have options. When you're a junior, it's really not much of an option. Like Zach Root is not going to have a conversation. He's going to go ahead and sign. Vahiva Aloy, Gage Wood, no doubt about it. You don't want to come back as a senior and have no leverage. Charles Davalon could come back and have a junior year of leverage. The reason why I just don't imagine he's going to, entertain that option is because what would he have to do as a junior at Arkansas to up his stock, to get higher than that $1.3 million, which, again, it's just hard to say no to $1.3 million, regardless of what the context is. Unless you're Devin Booker, $1.3 million is a lot of money. So it's like, if you turn that down and then you go play your junior year at Arkansas, how are you even able to really focus without thinking, holy cow, I turned down $1.3 million. How am I going to improve on this? Charles Davalon would basically have to hit 400 with 20 home runs. He'd basically have to win the Golden Spikes in order to truly up his draft stock, or he'd have to grow 4 inches in height and add different layers to his game. I just, not saying that I'm not trying to sleep on Charles Davalon. He's a tremendous baseball player, and I'm not saying that he couldn't come back to Arkansas and have a great year and do just what I detailed. I just think you got to go ahead and take the money at that range there. And so we will wish Charles Davalon all the best. And if he comes back for a junior year, great. We will celebrate in the streets. But I do not think that should be anyone's expectation right here. And so now we move on. And there's a pretty big drop off here because we're going from the number 66th ranked guy, Charles Davalon, to number 192, the next hog on this list, which is Brent Iredale, the Aussie, who went through the draft process last year and entered this year with like a decent amount of draft buzz. And I think there were some people who thought, hey, maybe this guy could even end up getting into the third, fourth round range. I think you even probably heard me say that. I was like, yeah, this guy, if all goes well, he could end up being a top 5 round type of draft guy. Most likely not going to happen this year, but still very respectable. I mean, pick number 192 is towards the tail end of the 6th round of the draft. So, like, again, nothing to scoff at all. Very respectable range, and also a range where, as a junior who's turning 22, you just need to go ahead and sign. Like, you could come back to school and maybe you can get a little NIL deal or whatever, but you would not be able to sign for anywhere close to this amount of money, which, by the way, the slot value for pick 192, again, there's a big drop off, but it is $325,100, which may not sound like a lot of money to you. It sounds like a lot of money to me. And again, Brent Iredale, if he came back next year as a senior who was 23, don't tell me anything about no JUCO rules, because I've heard a few people try and flex that as like a thing that MLB teams are supposed to cower to. They do not. Trust me. Just ask Craig Yoho if they do that. Brent Iredale would be signing for chump change compared to $325,000. And so I think that would probably be that'd be a good spot for him to sign. And, again, maybe a little bit disappointing because I think he entered the year with like a decent amount of draft buzz, and maybe 6th round pick is disappointing. But if you can get a 6th round, if your third baseman every year is a 6th round pick, you got a pretty damn good program. I think Arkansas is going to have a guy next year, that has a chance to even be picked higher than that in TJ Pompey. But Brent Iredale, I would say, is, his decision to Arkansas, I don't think he regrets it at all. I think the thing that's disappointing a little bit is we just didn't see like a ton of evolution from Brent Iredale. Like, I think however good today is July 10th. However good Brent Iredale is at baseball right now, that's about how good he was at baseball in September when I first got to look at him and first saw him pitch or batting against Arkansas pitching. And I was kind of blown away by it. And part of that was I felt like there was room to grow. And I'm not saying he didn't grow as a player and as a person and all that, but we didn't really see, all the question marks that we had back then. We still kind of have of like the swing and miss. He strikes out. He's a little bit up and down as a hitter. Now, defensively, I think he definitely answered some questions for the draft guys, which is why he was not drafted in this range last year. And so I think it was definitely a productive year for him. And it is, I think it says something that Brent Iredale is going to end up being a 6th round pick who had whatever it was, 14 home runs, 70 RBIs, hit like 300. And we were like kind of disappointed with this season. I think it just tells you how talented he is. So we wish him the best of luck. I imagine he's going to sign, and he is not going to regret his decision one bit. And moving on, the next Razorback on this list, we are now into the 7th round now at pick number 205, or at least ranking number 205. And that's Landon Beidelshees, the left-handed pitcher who, is the Ohio State transfer. Another guy that it says something about him that we're like, he's about to get drafted in maybe the 7th, 8th round, and we are like kind of disappointed with what we got from Landon Beidelshees, because we kind of thought, hey, this might be a weekend starter, one of the top lefties in the draft. Like, this is going to be an awesome thing. I don't think his year necessarily played out the way that that he wanted it to play out, or that some people maybe expected, but certainly a very, very solid left-handed arm. When you're a left-handed pitcher that throws 93, 94 and can run it up 95, 96 on a good day, can mix speeds, throws a ton of strikes. There's a lot to like about Landon Beidelshees as a prospect. We'll see if he's going to get that chance to be a starter at the next level, which is probably his most realistic path to a lengthy pro career, is proving he can be a starter, really locking down that 3rd and 4th pitch in his arsenal. I like Landon Beidelshees a lot as a human, as a pitcher, and I'm going to be wishing him the best. The slot value for pick 205 would be $292,400. That is also the pick of the Texas Rangers, who took another transfer left-handed pitcher in this same kind of range last year in Mason Molina. So maybe that would be something cool for Landon Beidelshees. Mason Molina's been promoted to high A already. He's doing pretty solid in his pro career already as well. And he's another guy that I feel like a left-handed transfer that came to Arkansas and maybe didn't go quite as well as we thought, but still a pitcher with a lot of talent, a lot of value there, and pro teams like that. Moving on a little bit, we're next up now at number 234, and this pick is a high school kid, McLean Moody, who is from Fort Smith. We talked about him on the show a few weeks ago whenever we were first talking about some of these draft things. He has been a very high riser in this draft. Like, if we had this conversation maybe 4 months ago, I would have been like, yeah, no, McLean Moody, in-state kid, yeah, he's 100% coming to campus. Like, don't even worry about it. he has risen a good bit. He's 6'5", 6'6", very projectable. And now he's kind of entered this range where it's, I've even seen him kind of up near that top 200 range, which is really kind of the danger zone. Now with pitchers, I've said this 1,000 times now, with pitchers, it's a little bit easier to sell them. It's a little bit less of a risk to go to college as a pitcher, which I know it sounds stupid to say risk to go to college. But for Landon Schaefer, by the way, who we were talking about earlier, it is a risk for him to go to Arkansas because he's not guaranteed to play at Arkansas. And if you're getting offered a couple mil as a freshman, as an 18-year-old, if you go to Arkansas and don't play, and even if you maybe don't play as a freshman, you end up playing as a junior, there is far from any guarantee that you're going to ever get offered that amount of money ever again. It's not exactly the same situation for McLean Moody, who, again, pick number 234. The slot value is $235,200. Certainly nothing to scoff at by any means. And if you were a junior, I'd be saying, yeah, for sure, go ahead and take that. But like McLean Moody, it's actually in play that he could go to Arkansas. He wouldn't even have to pitch all that much to warrant maybe having a chance to make that much money as a junior. And if you don't believe me, Christian Fauch is projected to go 253, or is ranked 253 by Joe Doyle. The slot value for that pick is $213,200. Not a ton of separation from what McLean Moody is getting as an 18-year-old. And again, as a pitcher, you can develop and you can get better without necessarily pitching 80, 90, 100 innings. And Christian Fauch is a prime example. I mean, he threw like 45 career innings in his time at Arkansas, and he's about to get drafted higher than he would have if he had decided to sign coming out of high school. And so we'll see what McLean Moody ends up doing. In-state kid from Fort Smith, very projectable. I think there's a lot of upside there. Would love to get him to campus. I am not nearly as confident that he is going to come to campus. And by the way, I think he's a kid that could wind up signing for way more than his slot value. I'm reading these slot values, but again, I want to remind you, there's no guarantee that if you get picked 227 that you're necessarily going to sign for that. If you're a senior, you're going to sign for way lower than that. And if you're a guy who's got some injury concern or maybe some question marks, you're probably not going to sign for that much. But if you're a high school kid or maybe you're a draft eligible sophomore, I would imagine you're going to sign for more than that. And so McLean Moody, I think, is actually a candidate to, even if he gets drafted, say, because a lot of times what happens during the draft is you have we go through 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, and people start saying, all right, now that we're in the 5th round, is it safe to say that so-and-so's coming to Arkansas? And I always say no, because where you're picked really doesn't matter all that much. There's guys that sign for millions of dollars in like the 9th round. You know what I mean? Like, it happens. And I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen with McLean Moody, but don't get too bent out of shape on the draft position as much as what they end up signing for. And I think with a high school kid like McLean Moody, he is a very strong candidate for an overslot type of deal. And so I think, you see him at 234 and you see that signing or that slot value and you're like, 220,000. Yeah, it's nothing. He could very well end up signing for maybe 600, 700,000. We saw it happen last year with the Eli Lovich kid, who ended up signing, I think it was like 650 or 690,000 in the 11th round. Not saying that's going to happen here, but I think McLean Moody would kind of fit that type of criteria as someone who might be there in that range. And another guy who is certainly going to be one we need to watch for, Carson Brumbaugh, an alum of the Baumbastic Podcast, was on, I believe was that Wednesday's episode, Tuesday's episode? I can't remember. The days are all jumbling together. I guess it was Tuesday's episode. Carson Brumbaugh, really talented infielder who is enrolled at the University of Arkansas. He comes in at 262 on this list. And now, again, everything that I just said about McLean Moody 100% applies to Carson Brumbaugh. And Carson Brumbaugh, as I just detailed, is an infielder. Now, he is, of course, a two-way guy, but he even said the other day he views himself as a hitter first, and that's what I think he is projected to play in college and probably what he's more of a prospect at long-term. I think there's a little bit, more risk for him going to college. But I think in this range, we're now in the 9th round. And again, the slot value for 262 would be $206,900. Again, nothing to scoff at all. But I think if that is actually the number that is being offered to Carson Brumbaugh, I expect him to 1,000% be a Razorback. But you just never know. I feel like there's always going to be that one team that really falls in love with them. And, Joe Doyle has him at 262 on his board. They might have him at 150 on their board. And so if they get a chance in the 8th or 9th round to take a stab and say, hey, we'll go ahead and sign you for 3 times the slot value, that's going to be an intriguing offer. And so I don't think you can really feel comfortable. Really, I would even say, because, again, it's not as much about the draft position, but I really think once you get past maybe the 12th round, that's about where you start. Because in that 11th and 12th round is always historically, or at least historically when the draft is a 3-day thing, it's always the kind of like guaranteed whoever's getting drafted there is getting an overslot deal. That might not necessarily be the case this year since they're doing rounds 4 through 20 all on the same day. But I think once you get to maybe that 12th, 13th round, that's when you can start really feeling confident about some of these freshman guys. But again, it's really all about the slot value or about the signing bonus more so than anything else. The next player on this list, very notable one. So listen up close. Justin Thomas Jr., everyone's favorite player, the center fielder from Arkansas, had an awesome junior year, man. It was a lot of fun. Had some huge moments down the stretch. Had what should have been the most clutch hit of the year to give Arkansas a 5-3 lead in the final game of the year against LSU. We're not going to comment on what happened after that, but Justin Thomas Jr. is the freaking man. Certainly made himself a lot more intriguing as a draft prospect this spring, because last year he was a guy that kind of wanted to sign and did not get drafted and did not get that opportunity. Coming to the SEC, hitting 300, showing off the athleticism, showing off the glove, certainly helped raise his profile a little bit. He is also, the last time we did this conversation, Joe Doyle had him at 517 on his list. He is now all the way up to 327, which, again, I just don't think is a coincidence. I don't think that's like just I don't think Joe Doyle just woke up randomly and was like, I just love Justin Thomas Jr. I think that's kind of an inclination as to the interest that Justin Thomas Jr. has generated. And again, he's a junior who could come back to school. And hell, there was even a time where I thought, hey, maybe he will come back to school. We're now in that range where it's the 11th, 12th round where all the slot values are set at 150. Anything you go above that counts against your bonus pool. It'll really just come down to how much he's willing to sign for, how much a team is willing to cut into their bonus pool, and how they view Justin Thomas Jr. But I feel like if he gets drafted anywhere in that range of 327, which again is in that 11, 12 round range, I feel like Justin Thomas Jr. will be a very strong candidate to sign. And honestly, I feel like, and here's another thing, these teams don't just draft these guys blindly. You will every now and then, especially later in the draft when you get to the 17, 18, 19, 20 rounds, they will absolutely take flyers on kids and just say, hey, we'll just draft them and maybe see if we can get a change of heart or something and see how that plays out. But in this range, the 11, 12 round range, if you're drafting a college junior, that means you have spoken to that kid and you have come to an agreement and you know what his number is, you know what he's willing to sign for, and you know you can reach it. So if you see Justin Thomas Jr.'s name come off the board anywhere in this range, do not expect him to come back to Arkansas. And so we'll just see how it plays out. And we'll see what his number is, because, like 200,000 again may not sound like a big deal, but I feel like if Justin Thomas Jr. can sign for 200,000, he would not have that opportunity next year. And would he maybe be able to get some type of NIL package from Arkansas? Absolutely. But would it be that much? I don't know. Maybe. But also he would be, entering the draft next year as a junior. And as Chris Lanzilli told us on the show a few weeks ago, you really, entering a pro organization as a senior that signed for $5,000 as opposed to a junior that signed for $200,000, that's a very big deal. And it's a very big deal compared to it's definitely a big deal if you're a freshman signing for $600,000 or whatever. Like, the way you're treated by your organization, the opportunities you're going to have at the next level are very different. And so I kind of think it's probably in a lot of these guys' best interest, if you're a junior, to sign if you can. Now, of course, if you're only getting offered a little bit of money here and there, and you just want to go ahead and take your chances, cool. But I think if you can sign for any amount of money realistically as a junior, you should probably go ahead and do it. And I know a couple, like last week I said 51% Justin Thomas returning. I'm not holding firm on that. I would probably expect Justin Thomas Jr. maybe in the 65% range of Justin Thomas Jr. Moving on. And the next guy in this list, actually, we got one more to talk about, one more high school kid to talk about before we talk about Micah New, the transfer from Marshall. But the next guy on this list is Joey Lorenzini from California, 399 on Joe Doyle's list. Lorenzini is also, by the way, has already moved into campus. He did a great interview with Andrew Hutchinson the other day, talked about how excited he is to be a Hog and all that. I've met his dad, who listens to the show every now and then. His dad's the man. I think he's really excited about starting his college career. Now, of course, he's a very intriguing prospect, big, tall, left-handed pitcher. There's a lot of upside there, man. I'm a huge fan of this kid's skill set. Like, I think he's got a real chance to come in and help right away in like a legit left-on-left type of role. But I think there's some upside there for him to be a legitimate weekend starter type of arm. And I think MLB teams see that projectability as well. And so I think he's definitely going to have some interest. Now, again, if it's in this $399 range, I think you should definitely feel pretty confident about him coming to Arkansas, but you never know. I've seen him a little bit higher on some of these other lists. And, he's kind of, depending on who you talk to, there's always different opinions on where he might be viewed by some MLB teams. I think he's definitely one to keep an eye on. I expect him to remain firm with his commitment to Arkansas. He's already here on campus. Now, again, there's guys, it happens where people are literally on campus and then they get a call that's like, hey, we got $500,000 for you. And all of a sudden they're like cleaning out their dorm rooms. Like that kind of stuff does happen. So just because a guy's on campus does not mean for sure that he's going to stay at that school. But I do expect Joey Lorenzini to be a guy that stays at Arkansas. And let's keep our fingers crossed for this one. The next guy on this list, Micah New, again, the Marshall transfer, number 433. It's crazy how much things can change because 2 months ago, Micah New was hitting like 260 at Marshall, and he had like 5 home runs on the year. And he was, by every metric possible, just not a notable, guy to write home about. Not a big-time draft prospect, not a big-time transfer portal target, like not really much of anything. All of a sudden, you hit 11 home runs in your last 13 games of your junior season, and then you go to the Cape Cod League, and you're leading the league in home runs. He's got 7 already, hitting over 300. Now, he did go 0 for 5 with 4 strikeouts yesterday, which does help Arkansas. I kid for the most part. But he has done more for himself in 2 months than I think anybody I've ever seen in terms of like actually, because, we always say, yeah, you play good, your stock's going to go up. You play bad, your stock's going to go down. That is true to an extent. And, maybe Gage Wood's an example of someone who really helped themselves over the course of 2 months. But, Micah New was a complete non-factor. I even said myself, when I heard that the staff reached out to him, I did a quick scan of his numbers, and I was like, I don't really care. I don't think he's that good. But the more you look into it, there's a lot of speed there. He's stolen 11 bases this summer, by the way, in the Cape. There's a lot of athleticism. He's a center fielder who has some experience playing the infield, but center field seems to be where he's found a home. There's some upside there with the glove. The foot speed is certainly there. The power is starting to show up, and now it's showing up with a wood bat as well, which is very notable, of course, for pro teams that are trying to draft these guys to hit with a wood bat. Certainly helps to see a guy hit over 300 with 7 home runs with a wood bat against good competition. And one thing, some of Arkansas's other transfers who we're going to talk about here in a second that played at, for example, Ball State, that is in the MAC. That's where Dylan Gray goes from. Not great competition at all. You may think the Sun Belt is on that same echelon as like not great competition. The difference between the Sun Belt and the MAC is actually pretty different. Not night and day different. It's not like facing the SEC, but the Sun Belt's sneaky one of the top 4 or 5 conferences in baseball. And so I think the fact that he's faced a little bit better competition, and now that he's going out there and doing it in the Cape certainly helps his case. And at the end of the day, the draft is a tools-based game. College production is cool and it matters, but it doesn't really matter as much if MLB teams don't think that you have tools that translate to potentially being a big leaguer. You don't believe me? Logan Maxwell is not on this list. Logan Maxwell was the number 3 hitter in Arkansas's lineup. Hell, you can make an argument at times Logan Maxwell is Arkansas's best overall bat, the most important bat on their team. Great college player, hit over 300 in 3 different college seasons, upped his power production this year, hit more doubles, really showed he was like a legitimate hitter. He is not a draft prospect because he doesn't have those tools that MLB teams look at and say, hey, this is going to translate. This is going to, help you advance through high A, double A, triple A, big leagues. And so he's not as much of a draft prospect despite having a great college resume and being a better college hitter than a lot of these guys that we're talking about. Like Logan Maxwell, is there any doubt that he was a better college hitter than Justin Thomas Jr.? No. But Justin Thomas Jr. has some speed that MLB teams look at and they say, wow, we can maybe translate that. Oh, he's a really good defender out in center field. That could translate. The hit tool, we'll work with that. There's a little bit of pop in the bat. Maybe we can get something there, but we know we got some tools right here to work with. And I think with some of these guys that Arkansas has in their transfer class, like a Dylan Grego, like a Damian Ruiz, I think MLB teams look at that and see production, but I don't know if they necessarily see the tools that are going to be big league type of tools. Micah New might not have the production, but he's certainly got the tools, and now you're starting to see the production match it. That's why he has certainly made himself a legitimate draft prospect. Now, all that being said, 433, that would be in the, like, let's do some math here. It'd be like the 14, 15 round range. I would feel pretty decent, if that ends up being it, if he really ends up getting, offered a signing bonus in that, 80,000 to 120,000 range. I would feel great. Pretty much anything up to 150, I'd feel great about. But you just never know. There might be some big league team that's gotten a good look at him this summer, and they're like, I think this kid's a top 10 round pick. Let's sign him for top 10 round money. If that's the case, all bets are off. But I think Micah New is going to end up making it to Arkansas, but it's going to be by the skin of his teeth. Like, I think there's going to be some room for us to sweat it out, and we'll see if a big league team decides to take a flyer. Just 4 more names now on this list, and then I will let you guys get out of here, I swear, and we'll run through them pretty quickly here. Jordan Martin is at 442 on this list. He's from Missouri. What was it? Somewhere in Missouri. It's like Missouri City, Missouri something. I don't know. He's from Missouri, Jordan Martin, and he's one of my favorites in Arkansas's freshman class. 6'5", right-handed pitcher, basketball player. Was a tremendous basketball player in high school, and was also a shortstop, was also a two-way baseball player. So just a really good overall athlete. He is now, in the last couple months, decided to focus on pitching, and I think that move is going to serve him well. He's in the like 91, 93 range so far, but again, 6'5", 225, big, strong, projectable kid who's just now starting to really focus in on pitching. There's a lot of upside there. His fastball has got a lot of life on it too. I think this kid's going to be a potential. Like, I would love to see him in like a midweek starting role next year and really have him, because there's just so many tools there. And like, you watch him throw right now, he's throwing 92, 93, and it looks like he's like barely throwing. It's like you could tell there's like some he's got more in the tank, more tools to get to. And so I think going to Arkansas will serve him well, and I think he will be a much better draft prospect when he comes back around as a junior. So I'm intrigued to see him get to Arkansas. I don't imagine him signing. But who knows? Everything that I just said to you, a big league team probably saw that as well. And so there might be some team out there that's like, man, I really think this kid's we might as well get him cheap while we can, and we can probably get him for $500,000. We'll see how that plays out. But with this range of him being 442, I think he's probably going to make it to campus. Parker Coyle is the next guy on this list at 454. I don't remember if he was on this list before when Joe Doyle did this. I kind of thought he might be a potential draft guy. Of course, Parker Coyle, not necessarily the most tantalizing stuff necessarily, but a left-handed arm who's got some swing and miss stuff. He's pitched in the SEC for 3 years, had a really productive junior season, was a reliable arm for Arkansas, big-time strike thrower. Perhaps maybe even the potential for him to be a starter with the amount of strikes he throws and his ability to mix speeds. I think he'll have a chance to get drafted. Is he going to sign for some crazy amount of money? Most likely not. But again, as a junior, if you can sign for $200K, you better go ahead and do it, because you're not going to have that opportunity as a senior. So we'll see what teams think of Parker Coyle if one of them wants to take a chance on him. I think if he gets drafted, that probably means he's going to go ahead and sign. Arkansas's even had pitchers the last decade or so get drafted in the 15th round and go ahead and sign for $120,000 for that same reason I just detailed, that it's like you're just not going to have that chance next year. We would love to have Parker Coyle back. I think it's also in play that he does come back, but don't be surprised if some team takes a flyer on Parker Coyle and he says, F it, might as well go ahead and start my pro career. So he's one to look out for sure. Another transfer to look out for, Zach Stewart, number 563 on this list. Now, he's coming from Missouri State, and he's coming off a year that really did not go his way. Zach Stewart was a draft-eligible sophomore this time last year and was coming off of a monster year at Missouri State, hit 21 home runs, hit 300. There was even talk that he might be like a top 3 or 4 round type of guy with the power that he has. Ended up having a high asking price, didn't get drafted last year, and then comes back and doesn't have a great year at all. That leads me to believe like it just makes sense for him to run it back and come to Arkansas and try and prove that he's still got that ability. But at the end of the day, again, he's a junior, and if any team is willing to take a chance on him, I think he would probably take a chance on that team. just because, again, you're not going to get that opportunity as a senior, most likely. I would probably still most likely expect Zach Stewart to make it to Arkansas, but him popping up on this list is not the most stunning development, but makes me kind of think that the door is not all the way closed for him to go ahead and sign and start his pro career. And then the last guy on this list is Aiden Jimenez at 6'08", and he was also not on this list the last time that we talked about it. And him being on this list is definitely notable because that's a guy that we've kind of penciled in as a big part of Arkansas's pitching plans next year. I expect Aiden Jimenez to still return to Arkansas. That is my gut feeling. The thing that really gives me confidence is he's a redshirt sophomore. He could come back and actually have that opportunity, still have a little bit of leverage. Now, he would be a year older, but as a pitcher who hasn't really thrown a crazy – I mean, he had a pretty good workload at Arkansas, but it's not like he's thrown 400 innings in his college career or anything like that. I think if he comes back and proves he can be a weekend starter at Arkansas, there will still be some draft interest there for him. So these are kind of the names to keep an eye on. I just went through a good bit of them there. Hope it wasn't too complex to keep track of. And again, we're going to have you updated as the draft plays out. I'm going to come right here on this podcast, and I'm going to let you know what happened, what it means, who's coming back, who's staying, who's going, who's hot, who's not, all that. But these are the guys to kind of keep an eye on throughout the draft process. You may notice that there were some names missing from this list. No Damian Ruiz, Arkansas's projected left fielder from Lamar. A lot of the reasons I just detailed earlier. No Dylan Grego, Arkansas's projected shortstop from Ball State, who, by the way, his coach, was telling Hutch that he's like, oh, yeah, this dude's going to get drafted like in the 7th round. This is going to be awesome. I'm not saying his coach is a liar, but I have not seen any draft guy list Dylan Grego as a real prospect that's got a chance to get drafted in the top 10 rounds. That doesn't mean he won't. That doesn't mean he can't. That doesn't mean that, there's not a big league team that's fallen in love with him and is really going to take a chance on him. But the more I really think about it, I think it would be in his, the Ball State coach's best interest if he went ahead and got drafted this year. And so maybe that's a little bit of wishful thinking, but I think Dylan Grego making it to Arkansas, still a very, very, very strong possibility. And him not being on this list, I mean, I don't want to say it's a good sign that a kid's not on a draft list, but in terms of his likelihood to make it to Arkansas, it does feel like a good sign. No Jackson Wells, Arkansas's transfer pitcher from Little Rock, who's been up to 98, got a lot of experience, proven a lot in his career. He's not on this draft list. No Ben Bybee, which I'm maybe a little bit surprised by because I feel like Ben Bybee and Parker Coyle, I know Coyle was better on the mound for Arkansas this past year and has been throughout his career. But Ben Bybee's a big, strong, projectable right-handed pitcher who has some starting potential, mixed speeds, has been up to 95. I feel like there's going to be one big league team that maybe wants to take a chance on Ben Bybee, and I've actually heard that Ben Bybee has spoken with some MLB teams that there is some interest there. And so, who knows? I don't know what Ben Bybee's situation is. I don't know what his number he's looking for. Maybe he does just kind of want to run it back with Arkansas, but I thought he might have a chance to be on this list. So him not being on it again is probably a good sign for his ability to maybe come back and pitch as a senior at Arkansas. And I think Arkansas would gladly accept Ben Bybee back. A lot of experience. Is he ever going to be this lights out, shutdown, dominant starter? Maybe not. And is he going to be like a closer for Arkansas? Maybe not. But I think there's a lot of value there. And again, you just can't pass on that much experience, and his leadership and his personality and stuff, I feel like is really helpful for this program. Would love to see Ben Bybee back for another year, but I also wouldn't hate seeing Ben Bybee get a chance to play some pro ball. So we'll see how that plays out. No Reese Robinette as well. He's, of course, a draft-eligible redshirt sophomore, so, of course, there's another year of leverage. I fully expect Reese Robinette to be back, and that's pretty much how it's going to – how the lay of the land is just a few days out from the MLB draft. Things can always change. We'll see how it plays out, but it's going to be a fun weekend. Going to be a very productive weekend for the program, man. Do not ever take for granted the fact that we might see 3 first-round picks come out of the University of Arkansas, man. And we might see a couple high school kids get drafted and sign for a lot of money, and it's not going to be this thing where we're like, oh, crap, what are we going to do? There's backup plans. There's contingencies. Arkansas's already been putting together a roster with some of those guys not in the plans. And so I think Arkansas's in a very good spot as a program. You guys don't need me to tell you that. And I think it's going to be reflected this weekend in the MLB draft. Can't wait to watch it. Can't wait to see all these guys get their opportunity. Prayers also, I don't know if, I don't really talk about faith that much on this show, but, again, I don't want to oversell it. These are very important decisions for these kids and their families. And again, every situation is different. Some of the stakes are higher for others than they are for others. You just never know everybody's situation, but you just never want to have any of these guys end up living with regret, regardless of where they go. If they, end up coming to Arkansas and they end up hating it and it ends up costing them a ton of money, you don't want that. You also don't want these guys to go to the draft and think it's going to be this awesome thing and then end up, maybe not signing for as much, or maybe they don't end up, they get hurt and their pro career doesn't play out that way. Like, you never want that regardless. And so this is a very big, weekend. Like, a lot is at stake for, again, the program, but also all these kids and their families. And so sending as many prayers and good vibes their way, because you just want it to all work out for the best, and it always does. And so we will be keeping our eye on that, and we will keep you loaded with the coverage here on the Baumbastic Podcast. Hope you enjoyed this sort of lengthy edition. I didn't expect it to go this long, but I appreciate you guys for hanging in there with me. Let's have a great one. Woo damn pig.